Tonight, controversial Bishop Eddie Long says he'll fight allegations of sex abuse, but admits he is not a perfect man. I'm Russ Mitchell. Also tonight, the next round in the tax cut fight. Top Democrats now say they'll put off a vote until after the election. Mideast peace talks at a crossroads as Israel's moratorium on West Bank settlement construction expires tonight. And making whoopie. Just how did this delicacy of cake layers and filling get its name?
Whoopie pie.
This is the CBS Evening News with Russ Mitchell.
And good evening. The public pressure has been building for days as 4 young men filed lawsuits charging sexual abuse by Georgia pastor Eddie Long. This morning, Bishop Long faced his megachurch's congregation and addressed the charges, vowing to fight them even as he did not unequivocally deny them. Mark Strassman was there.
Glory, 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 glory. Hallelujah.
For these Georgia faithful, Sunday services hit close to their spiritual home. Allegations of sinful sexual conduct against their own pastor, Bishop Eddie Long.
I'm under attack.
Attacked by 4 young men from his ministry. Long adopted them in their teens as his spiritual sons. But they say Long also seduced them with cars, jewelry, and scripture for sex. They were all past the legal age of consent, but are suing for emotional distress and fraud.
He took them on trips around the country and around the world and engaged in those sexual acts in those places as well as also property owned by the church.
Long, a former car salesman, built New Birth Missionary Baptist Church into one of America's most powerful megachurches with 25,000 members. Long lives large. This mansion's part of his gospel of prosperity, and he flaunts it, along with his gym physique. But today, he was more humbly defiant.
I have never in my life portrayed myself as a perfect man. But I am not the man that's being portrayed on the television.
There's also the hypocrisy factor. Bishop Long practices so-called muscular Christianity, socially conservative, male-dominated, and anti-homosexuality.
I want to serve notice to...
In 2004, he led this Atlanta march against gay marriage.
You'd have to kill me to shut me up.
Not today. Long refused to answer questions and never flat-out declared his innocence.
But he never declared his guilt there either.
Eddie and Greta Fennell, like most church members here, stand by him.
We all sin. So even if he's guilty, we support him 100%.
And I'll be here next week.
Long vows to fight the charges. His mega ministry is on the line. Mark Strassman, CBS News, Lithonia, Georgia.
In Washington, the tax cut debate appears to be getting what so many tax filers ask for from the IRS, an extension. Top Democrats said today a House vote on tax cuts is going to be postponed until after the election. Wyatt Andrews has the latest.
With taxes now a key campaign issue, Democrats admit the House will not vote on tax cuts before the election. The House will more likely adjourn and go home this week, blaming Republicans for the deadlock.
We weren't able to get it through the Senate because Republican obstructionism.
But Republicans say a tax cut decision is needed now as a signal to business it's time to hire more workers. Delaying the vote, they argue, is indefensible.
It will be the most irresponsible thing that I have seen since I've been in Washington, D.C., and I've been here a while.
Here's why the rhetoric is so intense. During the Bush administration, most Americans got income tax reductions, but under laws that expire at the end of the year. Republicans would make all of those tax breaks permanent at a 10-year cost of $3.7 trillion, and they're campaigning on the argument this is what the economy needs.
Now is the wrong time to raise taxes on anybody. We're trying to climb out of this recession.
Democrats would make most of the tax cuts permanent, except for couples that earn more than $250,000 a year. That costs $3 trillion, compared to the Republicans' $3.7, and that $700 billion difference raised from higher-income Americans is what this fight is about. Democrats say Republicans are carrying water for the rich.
They're going to have to explain to their constituents why they're holding up tax cuts for the middle class.
tax cuts may be good politics, but their financial impact is questionable. Many nonpartisan experts say in this economy, tax cuts do not equal jobs.
The decision to hire a worker is not based on, do I have a tax cut? It's based on, do I need another worker to meet the demand?
But before or after the elections, both sides privately believe that some kind of tax cut deal will happen this year, simply because no one wants the blame if all the tax cuts expire. Russ?
Wyatt Andrews on Capitol Hill. Thanks. There is no debate about this. It is hot in California. Temperatures in inland areas soared above 100 degrees. It wasn't much cooler along the coast, hitting the 90s. The combination of high temperatures and dry conditions have prompted fire concerns. Meanwhile, it's not high temperatures, but high water causing trouble in the Midwest. Cynthia Bowers has the latest on the severe flooding from South Dakota to Wisconsin.
Across the upper Midwest, the torrential rain may be gone, but the pain lingers. Small communities in Minnesota, South Dakota, and Wisconsin remain ghost towns after floodwaters up to 6 feet high inundated homes and washed over roads. Governor Tim Pawlenty got his first look Sunday at waterlogged southeastern Minnesota. This all the result of several days of heavy rain across the upper Midwest last week. As much as 10 inches fell in some places. Residents in tiny Zumbro Falls, Minnesota, who evacuated after their town went under, were finally allowed back, but only for a visit. Some found there wasn't much left to salvage. The story is much the same in Trent, South Dakota, not far from Sioux Falls, which saw its worst flooding in nearly 20 years. Here, folks are used to the Big Sioux River rising after heavy rain, but not like this.
What went through my head was, boy, you better get all my stuff.
In western Wisconsin, too, Sunday was a day for rummaging through waterlogged homes and belongings. Troy Filan lives in the hard-hit town of Arcadia.
Got phone calls from a few friends letting me know that flooding was occurring in Arcadia, so I got up and my house was already full.
Water and mud wiped out everything in his basement and garage, even his new car. Flood insurance will cover the damage, but money isn't always enough. This was his grandparents' pool table.
Sentimental, you can't replace that.
Wet fields will keep farmers from what they'd hoped would be an early harvest. And even after these parts dry out, the flood threat continues. This high water will swell the Mississippi River and could threaten Iowa in early October. Cynthia Bowers, CBS News, Chicago.
In Afghanistan, military officials say U.S. and Afghan forces have launched an offensive against the Taliban in districts near their Kandahar stronghold. A spokesman says it's the first Kandahar operation with multiple objectives and more Afghan than coalition troops. Turning to the Middle East now, today marked the end of the Israeli moratorium that had temporarily halted construction of settlements on the West Bank, which currently number more than 100. What happens next may determine the future of the delicate Israeli-Palestinian peace talks. Mark Phillips has late developments.
Israeli settlers on the West Bank weren't waiting for any official word before starting to build again, at least symbolically, after a 10-month freeze on new construction in most of the Palestinian territories. The foundations of a new building were being poured even as Israeli, Palestinian, and U.S. negotiators were frantically trying to work out some sort of a compromise that would enable peace talks to continue.
We will start building as in the past. We hope that tomorrow morning we'll see more and more and more new buildings.
Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu needs to placate the settler movement, on which his government depends to remain in power. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas put it starkly. The Israelis have a choice, he said. They can have peace or they can have settlements.
We're at a pivotal juncture in that region. It's important for Israel. It's important for the Palestinians. And we think it's essential that they keep on moving forward, keep on talking, keep on trying to work through these issues.
The Israeli government had urged the settlers to show restraint while the desperate last-minute negotiations continued, and in a concession to the Palestinians, hinted there would be limits to any new construction allowed. But restraint is a tough sell on both sides in the West Bank.
The Palestinians have to choose between sitting down and talking peace with us and turning their backs on us and missing yet another historic opportunity to reach peace.
Israel's Prime Minister Netanyahu may have called for peace talks to continue, but the Palestinians have already said they'll now take the settlement issue to a meeting of Arab states. The first serious bump in the road of these talks could still be the end of the road. Russ?
Mark Phillips in London. Thank you. Still ahead on tonight's CBS Evening News, who's behind the computer attacks on Iran's nuclear program and other targets? No one was hurt, but it was a frightening landing in New York last night. A Delta flight from Atlanta to White Plains, New York, was forced to land at JFK Airport because one of its landing gears malfunctioned. Sparks flew as one of the wings dragged on the runway. Computer security experts are trying to trace the source of a cyber attack that seems to have landed most heavily on Iran, including its first nuclear power station. Manuel Gallegos has more now on what we know and what we don't know.
Experts say Stuxnet is an exceptionally sophisticated computer worm that attacks the software used to control automated systems. It's now been found in thousands of computers in Asia, Europe, and the U.S., but 60% of the infected computers are in Iran. Stuxnet's first target may have been Iran's nuclear facilities.
It's one of the most sophisticated threats we've seen, and certainly one of the most worrying, considering it actually wants to change how machinery in the real world works.
Stuxnet is designed to weave its way into automated systems that control anything from an oil refinery to a water treatment facility. Once inside a computer, it secretly steals information and rewrites computer codes. Security experts say this malware or malicious software is no simple virus dreamed up by a hacker, but one that took 5 to 10 experts a minimum of 6 months to create.
There are not too many people who could pull this off. Certainly a government agency would be one of the suspects.
Experts believe Stuxnet was originally contained in a memory stick. It first struck in June 2009, but wasn't detected until a year later. Iran's state-run news agency says the cyber attack has had no impact on its nuclear facilities, but admits some of its employees' software has been affected.
I mean, it's interesting to see that the Iranian government itself has come out and acknowledged that it has been struck.
Trita Parsi believes it's a new dimension in sabotage and warfare.
How would you characterize Iran's response?
Well, on the one hand, the Iranians may want to portray that they've not really been hit hard by this in order to, part of their bluster, saying that they're doing really well. On the other hand, they want to convey to their own population that the United States does not have positive intentions towards the Iranians.
Computer security experts are now trying to decode the insidious threat, but its creators hid their tracks so well, experts say we will likely never know who created it. Manuel Gallegos, CBS News, New York.
And just ahead on tonight's CBS Evening News, did female candidates get a raw deal from the news media in campaign 2008? 2 years have passed since Hillary Clinton campaigned for the Democratic presidential nomination, and of course Sarah Palin campaigned for vice president as the Republican nominee. Rebecca Traister covered both candidates for Salon.com and is out with a new book about their campaigns and the media coverage called Big Girls Don't Cry, published by Simon & Schuster, which is a division of CBS. Rebecca, thanks for coming. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Let's begin with Hillary Clinton. When it comes to her campaign, just how much sexism was going on, not only in the campaign, but in the overall tone of the nation at that time?
Well, there was an enormous amount of sexism, some of it very overt, the Hillary Nutcrackers, the Iron My Shirt, you know, bumper stickers that used the B word and worse about her. That stuff was very overt. And then there was the more subtle stuff, the obsession with her voice and her tone and her laugh and what she was wearing that was all really tied to the fact that she was a woman. And that was the stuff that we needed to talk about a little bit more in order to recognize it as sexism.
I see. Did Sarah Palin go through the same thing in many ways?
Yes, although it came from different angles, obviously. But sure, as far as the obsession over, for example, her large clothing budget, you know, without much thought about the fact that if you're a woman on the campaign trail, you require a different kind of aesthetic maintenance, you know, that we have different expectations for how women look in clothes and in makeup than we do for men.
Now they say the difference between a hockey mom and a pit bull? Lipstick.
There were all kinds of ways in which the fact that these were women who we've really almost never had on a presidential stage before was going to impact the way we think about them, the way we talk about them, the way we criticize them in all kinds of ways.
Of course, an African-American man was running for president at the same time. Yes. And many discussions going on around this country. What's worse, racism or sexism? Because he was dealing with some things, obviously, as well. Yes. Any conclusions?
Well, I don't think that the comparison and the sort of, contest of oppressions was a particularly useful road to take, though it was one that many of us couldn't help but take. One of the things that became apparent through what was sexism and racism that we heard throughout the campaign was that these things are really connected, and that when you talk about people who've been shut out of power, people who have never had access to presidential power, or really even to serious presidential campaigns before, you're talking about different kinds of oppressions that have been connected, and in fact we saw them during 2008 being uprooted together a little bit.
Could a woman really serve as commander-in-chief? Well, I think we answered that one.
Do you think America learned something from the 2008 campaign? And are women better off today? Are they doing better today because of what Hillary Clinton and Sarah Palin went through in 2008?
I would not suggest that things are fixed and that, the misogyny and sexism is gone any more than the racism is gone when we talk about Obama sometimes. But what I would suggest is that the fact that we're having these conversations and that we have vocabulary and more of a heightened awareness about the sexism, about the prejudices that we're talking about with these candidates, means that we are moving toward a better place where we can talk openly about some of the unfairness that candidates face.
It's a fascinating book. It's called Big Girls Don't Cry by Rebecca Traister. Rebecca, thank you so much for coming in. Really do appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Good stuff. We're coming right back. This is the CBS Evening News. The first full-fledged presidential debate took place 50 years ago tonight when Democrat John F. Kennedy faced Republican Richard M. Nixon in front of a national TV audience. Although historians still argue the point, most observers at the time believed the more fit-looking Kennedy was the winner over Nixon, who was recovering from an illness and had refused professional makeup. In Taiwan, fish researchers have developed a way to breed lighted fish. Scientists injected fluorescent genes into the reproductive organs of angelfish. When the babies were born, they lit up. Imagine that. And just ahead on tonight's CBS Evening News, making whoopie pies, that is. Just what are they? We end this Sunday night with a sweet treat, a whoopie pie. Never heard of it? Well, here's Michelle Miller with the scoop.
Unless you grew up in New England, there's a good chance you've never heard of them.
I forget already what she told me it was.
It is a whoopie pie.
I come from the West Coast, so I don't really know whoopie pies that well.
It's chocolate cake. Chocolate cake with 7-minute frosting in the middle. It kind of tastes like marshmallow.
Beloved and claimed as local inventions by Maine and Pennsylvania, they're increasingly making their way onto bakery shelves across the country and into their local lexicon.
You know the story behind the name?
I don't. You want to tell me?
Yeah, well, apparently Amish farmers, their wives would put them in their lunch pails, and when did they find them?
They said whoopee. There you go.
Certainly when we talk about a whoopie pie, not everybody knows what that is, but as soon as we describe it, they say, oh, it's like a moon pie, or oh, it's like an Oreo.
San Francisco authors Sarah Billingsley and Amy Treadwell grew up with the treats and devoted an entire cookbook to them.
A whoopie pie is so much less intimidating than putting a big cake together.
And they say there's much more to them than just chocolate and vanilla.
We have wildly deviated from tradition, we freely admit. And we have flavors. We have savory whoopie pies. It's a jalapeno cornbread with a goat cheese filling.
No sign of goat cheese, but there are more than 100 flavors at the annual Whoopie Pie Festival in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, the heart of Amish country.
Use them for breakfast, dinner, and supper, and a midnight snack.
Whoopie pie.
Here they put pies on a pedestal with whoopie pie checkers, a table to make your own, and the world's largest whoopie pie, which gets the celebrity treatment. But true celebrities are known countrywide.
We've seen them in San Francisco. I've seen them in San Diego. I know that they're big in LA right now, and then in New York. But yeah, you're not finding them in Iowa.
At least not yet. Michelle Miller, CBS News, New York.
And that is the CBS Evening News. I'm Russ Mitchell in New York. Good night.
on television, online, and on the go. CBS News, the most powerful reporting anywhere.